We are still in week 15 and we are still in Maine, and today I will be spotlighting the disappearance of Pauline Rourke. Pauline was likely unaware of her roommate's dangerous and dark past, and many believe she became another one of his victims, especially since she was scheduled to meet with the Maine State Police about a recent murder of a local woman that she said her roommate seemed to be obsessing about. She vanished before that meeting, and her daughter is now sure that she saw her mother's lifeless body before she suddenly disappeared. In December of 1976, Pauline, 32, was living in a mobile home in Fairfield off of Route 139 with Albert Cochran, who was believed to be a distant relative. While there's no information about why she was living with him, I do believe that she had no clue about his past. Just a few weeks before Pauline vanished, a local woman named Janet Baxter was murdered on her way to get cough medicine from a local pharmacy. She never made it home that evening, and her boyfriend's car would be found abandoned on the roadside next to a river. And when officers opened the trunk, they found that she had died from 2 bullet wounds, one to the head and one to the chest. Pauline started to notice that her roommate was becoming very obsessed with Janet's murder. Not only did he consistently talk about it, but he even took Pauline and her daughter Honey to the murder scene. Pauline actually reached out to a relative and told them that she was afraid of Albert and she was afraid that he was involved in Janet's murder. Pauline was scheduled to meet up with the Maine State Police and talk about Albert's possible connection to Janet, but she never made it to that appointment. Pauline's daughter Honey says the night before her mother's disappearance, she heard Albert and Pauline fighting again. Honey said that this was a normal occurrence because Albert really wanted to be Pauline's boyfriend, and it seems Pauline continued to resist. Honey, who was 12 at the time, said she got up the following morning, saw her mom lying in her bed. She went and kissed her on the forehead, believing she was just deeply asleep, and walked out the door and went to school. When she returned home that day, her mother was gone. A couple of days later, a relative from Vermont would come pick up Honey, and now she believes that morning her mother was already dead. Albert was immediately the main suspect in Pauline's disappearance, and when they questioned him about Pauline's disappearance, he said he had nothing to do with it, but that they should check out wells for her body. They did follow that lead, but they did not find Pauline. What investigators were now aware of that Pauline likely didn't know was that in 1964, 12 years before Pauline's disappearance, Albert's wife and 3 children were murdered in their home in Illinois. Albert and his wife Patricia were separated at the time, and she was living in an apartment by herself with their 3 children. In 1964, Patricia, 19, was found strangled in her home with all 3 of her children. Craig, 10 months old, 2-year-old Christopher, and 3-year-old Christine were found with fatal stab wounds and their bodies stacked in the bathtub. Albert was the main suspect, and when investigators arrested him, he initially admitted to strangling Patricia, saying that he had discovered that she had murdered all the children and he strangled her out of anger. He would admit to a second confession that he actually killed all of them, but refused to sign that confession. When he went to court, he pled guilty to only Patricia's murder, and the charges for murder against his children were dropped. For Patricia's murder, he was sentenced 57 years, but only served 11 before being paroled. Investigators would keep pushing in Janet and Pauline's case, and in 1999, they were able to get a conviction in Janet's case as they found Albert guilty of her murder and sentenced him to life in prison. Honey did ask Albert a few times what happened to her mother, but he continued to deny having anything to do with her disappearance. And in 2017, at the age of 79, Albert died, likely taking the location of Pauline's body with him to the grave. Investigators have kept Pauline's case open, and they are optimistic that one day they'll be able to find her remains and bring her home. If you have information in Pauline's case, you are asked to contact the Maine State Police at 207-624-7143. Pauline's daughter Honey deserves answers, and we can help bring her home by continuing to share her face and case. Thank you so much for taking the time to get to know Pauline today, and don't forget, when you see those missing murdered posts on social media, hit share. It's a simple click. Every time we share a face, we do get closer to solving a case, and I will see you all back here tomorrow for another day in Maine.